Hello and welcome to another DIY indie musicians talking music. I'm with Nunny today, and Nunny, tell me, we were discussing before, and you said you just released something yesterday. So why don't we talk about that to begin?
Aye, definitely, Martin. Basically, done a remix for a song called "Walking Home." It's by this guy, Chris McConville. It's
Oh
the
wow!
last track on this album, and just a chance. I was down at an event in London earlier on this year,
Hmm.
indie label market event, and there was quite a few people decided to pop along and see us, and one of them being Chris McConville, and we get talking. He spoke about some of the remixes I've done with other artists, and he says, "Would you fancy remixing any of my stuff?" And straight away, I knew the song I wanted to get my grubby hands on because I've played some of his stuff on the radio, I've interviewed him and stuff. He's a top guy, and so it was one of them. He sent me some files, got the message, opened them up, and it's a track I was looking for without even asking. It was a song, so it was absolutely brilliant. It's one of the fastest songs I've ever turned around as well.
Right.
Normally this process takes absolutely forever. This is one of the quickest tunes I've ever flipped round.
What
And
was the BPM of it?
the original was 70, so it was quite a slow song. So I shifted them up to 80. It still sounds pretty slow, but it starts off like a kind of hip hop vibe at 80 BPM, and then it flips and goes double the speed, so essentially 160. Um, kind of hits a
That's
sort of,
fast.
it kind of hits a drum and bass sort of electro dance vibe.
Okay.
It's really cool. It kind of turns the song on its head, gives it a total different vibe. And his original songs are classic. And sometimes you worry, when you're messing with people's stuff, and it's like, is he going to like this? And instantly I knew he would. It was such a vibe, when you've got good stems to work with, great vocals.
Yeah.
I just knew what I wanted to do. I had the song imprinted in my head, before I even touched anything on the computer, and just straight in about it. And under 24 hours, that song was turned about for him.
Wow.
It's
Uh,
like I say, one of the fastest I think I've ever done.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it was like serendipity from the beginning to the end, right?
Yep, yep.
Random meeting. You knew exactly, both knew exactly which song,
Uh,
and you
I
had a completely clear idea from the beginning,
Yep, yep.
which I've a couple of times I've experienced as well, and it's just like it's like basically a steamroller at that point, isn't it?
I know it's kind of
Everything
it's just
just falls into place immediately. You don't have to
yeah.
think about it. You're not spending months you know,
I know
fiddling around. Wow,
I
that's
was
fantastic.
forcing myself like, to actually take a break because
Uh-huh.
I was just on it, just kept going and going, and I thought, right, take the dog out for a walk, let the ears rest, come back in, and let's see if that vibe is still there. And yeah, it's just one of them. And I could have added more or done other things and stuff to the track, but it was hitting the right spot basically. And I just
Yeah.
thought I want to keep it where it is. Don't want to over polish it. Don't want to go too far, and just keep it that kind of. It's got a right underground vibe to it, and I just totally dig it. It's so cool. A great guy to work with.
Excellent. Well, I'm gonna have to listen to it after we're done today. No,
Definitely.
it sounds very fascinating. So, when did you start doing remixes for people? How did that
Um,
begin?
God, I've kind of always done it. Way back. My roots originally. I mean, I'm going back to into the 90s if you want. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. I started as a musician, a guitarist.
Right.
Really, really, this is down a rabbit hole now. Of all people in the world, the guy that taught me guitar was my local postman. It
Okay.
was That's how random it was. I always wanted to learn guitar, and I knew he played. So at the age of about 13, 14 year old, something like that, I would go along to his mate's house. They were playing skiffle music, which at the time I didn't know what skiffle music was, but just a guy with a guitar, a guy with a banjo, they're covering all sorts of bands, Johnny Cash, but everything was in the style of skiffle,
Yeah.
and it was metal. Everybody's doing sports and all these different things, and I'm walking for 3-4 miles with my guitar to this guy's house, but I learnt, and it was cool. It kind of got me right into music, and then from there, I kind of always liked kind of messing about with computers, and somebody had asked me, would it be possible to record something and loop it? And I was like, well, I don't really know how to do that on a computer, but I suppose you could. And they showed me what they're trying to do, and which basically got me started on reel-to-reels. So we were, the big reel-to-reel.
Oh yeah.
So we are recording a bit, you're splicing the tape, joining it back in, making the loop essentially. And it was a bit sketchy, but it would do the job, and you could overdub on it. So you could build up in one, record it onto the other with the added part, and keep going. But the more you done it, the more it bounced down. The quality was terrible.
Yeah.
So I researched. I had an Amiga, Commodore Amiga 500. Don't know if you're familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Very basic computer.
Yeah.
512 megabyte or something like that. And I bought a sampler, 8-bit mono. Now, anybody that doesn't know any sort of technical terms, that's the equivalent of what your landline phone done when you were a kid. That's the quality.
Yeah.
So, and you could run, at the time it was only 4 channels you could run, and then I got a program, Octamed, Octa being 8, you could run 8 channels, and started producing hip hop. And that was back in 1993.
Okay.
And had done an entire album, recorded all the music on the computer, but we're using a 4-track recorder for putting the vocals on. Recorded all that, get quite into the production and how we were doing stuff, only to then upgrade to get myself a PC and have to re-record every single break, sample, the lot, all the vocals.
God.
Yep. And then even once you've done that, and then it's a mission going through, getting the right software, what to use, teaching yourself. Once you've got it recorded, and then you start thinking, can I put that onto CDs? Why does it not sound as good as up against other music? And then you start learning about mastering music, and
yeah.
Before a lot of this stuff was available on computers, so it was like hiring or borrowing things like, I think it was TC Electronic or something. One of the companies that done a really cool finalizer, and I had this thing basically for a weekend. That's all we could afford to hire. It was a weekend, and then try and master an entire album's worth.
Oh my God!
It has to be back. It has to be back to the studio. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I've got a heavy charge, and it was pretty cool. But I mean, even during that time, you get people asking, "Oh, so you record stuff? You're in a band. You can do this. So if I give you some of my recordings, do you think you could remix this?" Or even when you're helping people out, recording the band for them, they start listening to it and they're happy with the recording, but you think to yourself, oh, I would have done that differently. But you've recorded it the way they wanted it. You maybe change the drums or have a different keyboard, bass part, whatever.
Yeah.
And you start just, well, they're happy, they've got their finished recording. I'm going to try and remix it and put what I would put behind the band, behind the vocalist.
Yeah.
And it kind of just sort of grew legs from there. And so every once a blue moon, somebody would say, "Oh, do you fancy doing a remix?" I've got the studio files, and I thought, "Oh, cool." And it's just something, like I say, I've always done. But I get the opportunity. Some good friends. I don't know if you're aware of a band, The Lovely Eggs. They're pretty big over here. And they brought out an album. I think it was in start of COVID, really. When everything was kind of getting locked down, they were due to tour, and actually got a #1 with the album. The album was doing phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the touring, everything got cancelled. The same that happened to everybody. But it felt terrible. They were finally, the hard work they've been doing, they're finally getting recognition. They've got a #1 album, and the world shut down. So they had the chance to do a takeover show, BBC Radio 1.
Okay.
And for fun, I'd remixed one of their songs about a year or two before, which was cool, and absolutely loved it. And we put it on YouTube, and it was a good laugh. That's all. Just fun. That's all it was done for. So they get back in touch and says, "Would you mind if we use your remix on this show?" And I was like, "Aye, we'll go for it. Aye, that's perfect." And he says, "Well, how do you fancy doing another one for the show?" I thought, "Aye." I was, "Well, long have I got it?" And they're like, "Well, within a fortnight, it's going to be aired in 2 weeks." And I thought,
Okay.
"That's plenty of time." So I ended up, I remixed 2 tracks for them, the top of the one I'd done, and the 3 songs ended up on Radio 1. There's only 7 tracks on the show, and 3 of them were mine, and they were absolutely banging. It just turned out phenomenal, and it was very, very, very similar to the process I spoke about earlier with Chris. When you've got that idea in your head, and the vibe's happening, and you just hammer on and go for it. And it's just kind of grew from there. I say certain people ask, and if I've got the time to do it, if the timing's right, then I'll keep doing the remixes.
No, it's great. No, it's fantastic. And do you limit yourself to one style when you do remixes, or you're a
No,
little bit across the board?
no, it's whatever's happening at the time. There's a sort of trademark sound to some of my stuff. If you want the backbone of it's always going to have a sort of hip hop vibe in there, whether it's going to be the drums or whatnot. But I've done tons of production for people where it's totally away from that. But if it's a specific remix from myself, then you could kind of gauge it. You could play a few tracks and you could probably pick out what one's mine, kind of thing.
Okay. No, cool. So, you're not only a remix artist, and I know you have a radio show as well, you said.
Yep.
But I also see your place is just filled with instruments. So
Yep.
I think you might be a musician as well.
Yep. There's all sorts, as you can see, the cello, violin, bass guitar, electric guitar, you've got a mandolin, ukulele, there's a
So
banjo.
anything with strings. Banjo?
Oh,
Do you play the banjo as well?
banjo, there's an accordion on the floor, set of turntables, controller decks, reel-to-reel, laptop, everything. Machine, which is just like a fancy sampler drum machine type thing.
Yeah.
And there's various other instruments scattered throughout the house as well. But
Wow.
you never know. You always need some sort of an instrument for a track, and a lot of the stuff. At the very start, I was playing everything, which is cool. But you can only spread yourself so far. And luckily, I know a lot of talented musicians.
Oh, that's good.
So it's pretty cool. And sometimes it's just the chance if I'm around popping in to say hello. It's good to have all the gear there instead of them saying, "Oh, if I knew I would have brought my guitar or this or that." There's no excuse. I can pull it out the cupboard and say, "There you go, play that hook for me."
No, it's great. And I know I was listening a little bit through your catalog on Spotify,
Right?
and it's very eclectic,
It is,
which I always like.
brilliant.
And it was quite funny. The first track I was listening to, it was just like, oh, I know at least one of your influences, and it's funny, it keeps coming up again and again and again, is Captain Beefheart.
See, I've had that.
I so had that feeling. I don't know if it's the way you sing or just the approach to things, but it was just that slight skew that it just made me think of him right away.
So you'll be talking about the Voldo stuff then?
Yeah.
Right. Well, the vocals isn't myself. That's Kyle that sings.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because Captain Beefheart, there's been a few people have said that to us.
Yeah.
Because the one he always gets is, "Oh, you sound like Beck." We get that quite a bit. But the Captain Beefheart, when I first heard that, I was like, "Hang on a minute, that's a familiar name." So I looked him up, and what's even more strange is that Captain Beefheart is the absolute double of one of my mates from back in the day, who I was involved heavily music-wise with.
Yeah.
And they look identical, which is crazy. And then I was like, put put on some straight away when I heard some of his materials. Like, right, I get it now.
Yeah,
But that's cool. It's cool that people pick up on that.
yeah. It's just it was immediately recognizable. I mean, I heard a lot of other things, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
but that just got me right away.
spot on.
You know, because it's just it has that everything sounds a little bit off.
Aye,
It's not that it sounds bad or anything. It just doesn't sound what you'd expect. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And no, it worked really, really well. I have to say. Although
Brilliant.
I also heard a lot of acoustic strings.
Yep, yep.
You know, very folky on one hand. Was definitely hearing, you know, sort of alt rock.
Yep.
But also I'll say it, and it might be that we're both probably of the same generation. There was also a little bit of prog rock that I heard too.
Yep, yep.
So why don't we talk? What are some of your influences outside of the, you know, the unknown ones like Captain Beefheart?
There's quite a lot. I mean, a massive influence for me. I was saying earlier about the hip hop stuff. So when I was younger, it was more kind of like grunge bands and stuff I was into. You know, likes of
Okay.
Nirvana, Pearl
Yep.
Jam, or even Transmission Vamp, that kind of stuff. Absolutely loved it. And then through it, with mates with skateboarding and kind of getting into that scene, I was sort of listening more and more to hip hop and we're
Yeah.
watching these skateboard videos, and the music that was dubbed over all these videos back then was phenomenal. So straight away, you didn't have the internet, so you're, who's that band, you know? And you get your cassette deck up at the telly, you know, taping the audio
Yeah.
and stuff. But there was a lot of sort of hip hop, even a lot of my mates were, you know, they're big Public Enemy fans and NWA and stuff, but it was more sort of like Daz FX, Wu-Tang Clan. There was kind of all sorts. Just certain stuff really get my ears up, and it was like, hang on, this is something else. And
Yeah.
then we're trying to not so much replicate it, but because the whole thing with hip hop, it's kind of representing yourself, you know, and a bunch of Scottish guys trying to do hip hop, you know, it's like it's totally different. It's, you know what I mean? It's totally different.
Yeah.
But there's tons of influences. So likes George Clinton, Funkadelic, Parliament, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Typical classics like Pink Floyd, Bob Marley. You know, I think, you know, every our generation at some point growing up they've heard that, whether they're into it or not, they'll have heard it. You just couldn't escape it. But there's so much stuff, just different, because it was predominantly like Iron Maiden and all these different sort of heavy metal bands. That's what kind of, before I could even play an instrument, you know, I just used to, I can't even mind the program. Used to stay up late, and some rock program was on through the night, and you stay up late to watch this stuff. It was phenomenal, you know. And before the days I've been able to tape it and stuff, you know.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to hear, because I was definitely going to say definitely there's also the songs that are very much hip hop, and then going into trip hop as well, because
Yep,
I heard there's definitely, you know, I guess that's the influences of your remixing,
yep.
because I can imagine that when you're actually producing material for, you know, more rock material, that you're half in the remix mind to begin with, right?
Yep, yep.
You know,
And the
and
thing is, when you're doing, especially a lot of the production, not so much nowadays, but when I first got into it, it was all sample based.
right.
So you're having to skip through so many bands like catalogs looking for these amazing like drum breaks, you know, or a guitar hook, you know, and guaranteed if you find some sort of amazing sample on one of these records, you end up you like the band anyway, because you've found your bread and butter, and there's the sample I'm looking for. What else has
Yeah.
the band got? And you start, it just keeps going down rabbit holes, you know. One band leads to another.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I
And
love that.
have you seen there's this great documentary on the origins of basically hip hop.
Right.
and how it came out of this whole Jamaican community in New York, who were doing these. Well, basically, they had the sort of standard sound system things, the Jamaican thing, and they were doing it in these parks where they're basically going to the light, the public street lights, tapping in to get the electricity, and then using equipment that had mostly fallen off trucks, and and they had these crazy systems. But what was interesting, the innovation was they figured out the break, and they started finding those first songs. Many of them were early funk things and jazz.
Yep.
And literally they were playing the samples on turntables.
Yep. Yep.
And then they'd have someone toasting on top.
Yep.
And the toast eventually became rapping.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But it was just absolutely unbelievable.
And
you see the reel, it's like it's the show DIY, and that is just so DIY.
Yeah.
And it's the magic of it in a way.
I know. That's really cool. That is. It's really, really cool. And it's like, so. I mean, I've still got my trusty turntables here. And I mean, for the Voldo stuff, that's basically how we've been rehearsing lately. Is when the process of putting together an actual full live band. It makes it easier for gigs, but until then, we're basically running off a set of turntables, a guitarist, and 2 vocalists.
Wow.
With it, it's a lot easier because I've got things like Serato. So if I've essentially made a song on my computer, it can then be it's played on the turntable, but it's going through a laptop. So it's like time-coded vinyl controlling it. It's all evolved, but it still goes back to it can't escape the hip hop roots. It's just one of those things.
Yeah. No. Listen, nor should you. I mean, one of my big dreams is I would love to play some of my more electronic music live,
right?
And figure out ways of doing that a lot with looping and effects, and and actually getting the ability to jam. And then I look back and I see your cello, and I'm thinking that should be electrified. Because electrified cello. Did you ever hear early ELO?
Oh,
when what was his name? Ron Wood was in the band, or Ray Wood was in
possibly, because one of my mates was absolutely nuts about them. He still is, actually. So no doubt.
That first record before they sort of broke up and it became Jeff Lynne's project and really Beatles 2.0.
Right.
But the early stuff was crazy because the main instrument was Ray Wood, who was from The Move,
right?
Like the 60s band The Move. And he was playing electrified cello.
Superb.
And that was like the lead, but he was playing it like a lead guitar. So it was power chords, right? On the cello. And it was just, and then they had a string section. They had lots of strings, right?
Right.
But the approach, and it's too bad that it became more and more prettified as ELO became successful. But the first thing was just, it was like imagine an orchestra that wanted to be rebellious and had a punk band, but they couldn't afford, anything but the classical instruments. So that's what they used. They just electrified them.
That's brilliant.
And that's what it sounded like. It was insane. No, that first record, the one with the light bulb, or there's also some video floating around on YouTube of them when they were just like the first concerts they were playing and stuff. It's unbelievable.
I need to check that out.
Yeah, you have to check it. It's just unbelievable. And since then, it's just like, I want an electric cello. It's like, like a death metal band, but and actually it works so well because so much of the guitar in death metal and stuff like that is all very classic influenced, right? Like the composition, they're usually people who are classically trained musicians who are doing it. Or the better ones anyway. So, anyway, it's I thought that was quite funny.
That's cool. Like you're saying, we done a Voldo song called Cali Lane, and now the very opening of the song is me playing the cello, but I'm plucking it. And a lot of people get in touch about the song and say, I love your guitar at the start. And it's like, wait a minute, there's only guitar at the end of the song. It's like, and then as soon as because I've recorded and I've played the cello, I know what's in the song. But the more I listen to it, and it's like, actually, it does sound like a guitar, you know. But it's just one of those things. But when I first got it, and I'm no great cello player by any means, I basically learnt what I needed for the song.
Yeah.
But I was approaching it like a guitarist. You know, the very first night I picked it up, it's the same thing. Once you learn a sort of chord shape. Next thing,
yeah,
you know, rather than having it, you know, it's meant to sitting, you know, across your shoulder and stuff. You're looking at it like a guitar. You're trying to play it like a guitar, and it just doesn't work. You know, you've got to.
Yeah.
You've kind of got to learn the basics with it, and it's a cool instrument. I need to get more practice on it. It's such a cool instrument. It's a big appendix that can play them proper because I'm just playing little parts, you know, nothing fancy, and I can play a bit. If I get it wrong, I can drop myself back in the track and play it right. You know, I'm not having to play it live or professional or anything.
Right. No. Listen, I find the use of interesting musical instruments, especially in rock music, just so attractive. Because I've seen so many cases where it's the hook that makes a song.
Oh, definitely.
Because it sounds different. It's not like, you know, playing the same 3 chords on the guitar, right? There's only so much tone you can get. You know, it's like, unless you're Eric Clapton or something.
Well,
but it's not only that. It's like the cello, the oboe. Why isn't there more oboe? I mean, you know, you want to do a sad song. There's probably not an instrument that's sadder than an oboe, right? Or trombone. Oh my God, really good trombone players. What a sound they get out of the trombone, right? Most people won't even know it. Like they'll listen to a horn section, and the one that the hookiest is the trombone half the time, right? Just because they can bend things so much. Because there's no real it's anyway. But it's
that's the thing.
Yeah.
You've got to find it, and that's the same. See, playing the cello, it's exactly the same. You've got. I was told, my mate's mum, she was a professional violinist, and I took the cello around when I first got it, and I says, "Can you give me a few pointers?" But she did. She went over some of the basics with me, but she says you've really got to. She goes, you've got to feel the music, and that was just a saying that stuck with me. Yeah. It was like, she's absolutely right, and she says, she goes, once you get a bit more comfortable and relaxed with it, you'll start coming out with different kind of phrases if you want. You know, she goes, just mess about with it and just always enjoy it, and you'll feel it. And she's right, she's spot on, because the guitar, you can say, put your finger on the 3rd fret and this and that, you know, and it's just a total different ballgame. It's brilliant. It's really good fun.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too, because the feeling it makes sense, because I think with the fretless instruments, or the instruments where there's no real stops, the thing becomes then you have to have an incredibly good ear.
Yeah.
Because your hands then will work with your ear to find where the note is. Right? On the fretboard, or on the, you know, whatever, however it's named on something like a trombone. No, it makes perfect sense because of that. Yeah. So I'm sure as well you're old enough to remember one of the craziest sort of, it wasn't even a string instrument, but I recently came across it again. I think it was like one of these 50th anniversaries or whatever for a record. Laurie Anderson and her modified violin. Do you remember that?
No,
the late 70s, early 80s? No, well, this is something you should check out, because this is right down your alley. What? No, but seriously, it's a good idea. It might be something if you find a cheap cello. But what she had done, and it was absolutely genius,
right?
And you can only do it with a bow instrument, right?
Right.
Is she took a tape head,
all right,
and put that in the inside of the violin. Okay, and electrified it. So it was basically took an electrified violin, got rid of the strings, and put a tape, or I don't know if it was one tape head or a series of tape heads in it.
Right.
And then she had a number of bows, and each bows were magnetic tape.
Right. That's mental.
So what she was doing, and it was absolutely her, I think she only came out with one record, but it's like one of the craziest avant-garde records that ever came out.
Right.
But what she did is, it's like she had live samples,
Mental.
and she could play them with a bow, right?
That's nuts.
So oh no, it's crazy. So she'd have, like, I think it was mostly like vocal lines that she'd done, right?
Right.
And she could do, or just words or whatever. And she could have that, that sort of bowing effect that you can get, that dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 but it was with like someone's voice.
That'd be
So
quite.
And crazy stuff.
It wouldn't be a million miles away from scratching when you're on the decks. You know, the sort of outcome, the noise is going to be the sort of same idea.
Yeah.
Because you're pushing a record back and forth and then releasing it.
Yeah.
So,
but this is just absolutely nuts. It was like in the mid late 70s. I guess the record probably came out 77, 78, 79. But she was obviously doing it years before, right?
Aye.
But absolutely busy, totally record. What's it called? Something with science in it. In any case, Laurie Anderson. You should check it out. I should almost go over and here I'm gonna go and I'll Google it. I've got two screens, so I'm just gonna open up the screen and throw it on the side while we talk. But yeah, no, it's good. I mean, you seem to be perfectly placed to be doing these sort of crazy experiments.
Oh, I love it. There's kind of it's what you say. There's no boundaries with music, so it's just whatever sort of vibe you're on in it. That's the kind of main thing. And and it's like earlier on this year, I picked up a reel-to-reel. Just simply, I know people will, oh, why are you using that for recording and stuff, but
right.
Why do you want to put a plug-in on a channel to emulate something like that when you've got the real thing? It's like, that was one of the reasons. And with being an old analog reel-to-reel, you can really push these things, which you can't do with digital.
Yeah.
And it's trying to describe to people, you can get a real warmth to a sound by recording on reel-to-reel. So and again, it's all experimental. I didn't know this thing hadn't been switched on for 30 years. When I did, I was expecting it to catch fire or something when I first plugged it up, and it just smelled like an old people's home when I plugged it in. It was like, oh, is this going to be a fire hazard? And I put a reel on it, hit play, working fine. The fast forward and rewind functions are a bit kind of iffy on it, but it plays and it records. If I've got to rewind it manually, that's absolutely fine. The inputs and outputs work, and it came with its own original microphone.
Oh wow!
Which is awesome, because if you're looking for a pure, amazing lo-fi sound, it's like this wee microphone is brilliant. So it's wee things like that, which again, it just goes back to being experimental. Sometimes it's little things like that. I mean, speaking of which, there's like, you even get this.
Holy moly, what is that?
It's like a kid's megaphone voice changer thing.
That's great.
But a vocalist brought it round one night. Just said his kid was running about the house singing stuff through it, and goes, I want to try this in one of your tracks. So
yeah. Well, that's perfect for a stage show too.
Aye, it's pretty cool. You've maybe seen this in my post, but what soup can mic. So that is like total. No, it's
oh my god!
Lo-fi. I mean, it's a soup can.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how is it? Is that direct from the can to signal, or how is it? How's it hooked up?
It's basically, there's your input there.
It's great.
I'm not sponsored by these guys, by the way, but
yeah.
Soup Can Mic, that's what the company's called.
Right.
You'll find them online. You'll find them on Twitter and stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're old enough to remember playing with the soup cans and just the line.
The string.
and you could actually get signals through that, right?
Yeah.
It's like very, very low, the lowest of low tech, not even any electricity, right?
But it still works.
It still worked. I know.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy.
I've done all sorts. Pulling apart headphones to turn them into a microphone. You know, it's done silly things like that.
Yeah.
It all works. It's a bit
Yeah.
of a learning process, but it works.
Yeah,
Sometimes
no,
you-
I can even remember as well. I used to work in tech,
right?
and at one point they figured out a way to turn the screen of your phone into a microphone.
All right. That's mental.
Yeah, well, I guess they were using probably just the touch technology
Right, right.
and just taking like a very low, you know what I mean, low resistance off,
Uh-huh.
and they could use that to generate a signal, right?
Brilliant.
But crazy stuff. So I found the Laurie Anderson. So the album is called Big Science,
Right.
and they had, it's best known for the single. It's called "Oh Superman." You may have heard it because it reached '2 in the UK
All right.
when it came out. And I'm just trying to see when it was released. 1982 looks like. Yeah.
Hey, I've got that
But
much
definitely check it out.
I-
Plus, the album has a lot of, and I'm sure you're gonna love this too, Farfisa organ.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
I've got so much. I collect a lot of vinyl. Like a few phases. Looking for breaks and samples,
Yeah,
and whilst you're in these shops looking for stuff, you pick up so much. And there's every chance, what you're saying, if it was quite a big hit, because some of these records you pick them up and it's like a compilation album with all the hits of 1982 or whatever. So there's a
yeah,
good chance. I'm saying
yeah. But well,
I
listen,
don't think I've heard it. Probably
that
sample
album
it.
would be a gold mine for
All right.
samples
Brilliant.
because there's so many weird sounds they come up with,
Aye.
and
Aye.
it's one of the most left field albums that ever. It got a major release. This is how crazy it was, right? So someone
Aye.
obviously liked it, or she was part of. I think she was part of the sort of New York avant-garde scene.
Right.
So, you know, I'm sure some crazy people show up at their shows, right? Although, listen, it's interesting because I finally realized how Led Zeppelin got away with basically stealing so much of the old blues music.
All right.
I figured it out. It's
Aye.
interesting. No, it was the genius of their manager, or maybe it was Jimmy Page,
Right.
because you remember they signed to Atlantic Records, right?
Uh-huh.
I have to imagine that most of the material was published and owned by Atlantic Records.
Right.
And that's how they did it.
Aye.
Right? That was how they got around any issues. And it was like a revelation when I thought, it's just like, oh, that makes perfect sense
I would. Aye. Aye.
when you think about it, right?
That's
Because
nuts,
they would be the ones to sue, but why should they sue themselves, especially
Exactly.
when Led Zeppelin is not releasing a single and selling, 20 million records, right?
Yep.
You know. But anyway, I thought that was quite interesting, because when you compare it to maybe my favorite hip hop album, which is Paul's Boutique,
All right.
by the Beastie Boys, just because of how crazy inventive that was.
Aye.
You know,
Before
and really revolution. I mean, I thought I loved Public Enemy at the time when it came out, but they were hard to listen to be quite honest with you. It was like an exhausting experience listening to a whole record of theirs, because there's only so much. I don't know about you, but there's only so much rage until it's all out for me. It's probably why I was never really a big heavy metal fan.
Right.
But I thought Paul's Boutique was just, I don't know about you. Did you ever get into it?
Not so much. Later on, I kind of got into the Beastie Boys. At the time, I think just the simple fact is you couldn't escape it, and when something becomes like that, I tend to. It pushes me away, if that makes sense. Because it was a case of everybody's house you walked into. It's like, oh, have you heard this? And it's like, aye, I keep hearing it. But it was pretty dope for the time. It still is. It's still even for nowadays standards. But a lot of my mates, they were big fans. Kind of, let's say, Beastie Boys, even Public Enemy, stuff like that. NWA, which was all cool. I thought everybody was brilliant. Back then, you struggled to find somebody that wasn't good at hip hop. You know, the stuff that was getting released and coming over here. Everything, it was like the golden era.
Yeah.
But then, I was starting to kind of find more sort of underground rap. It's been Daz Effects, Lobster Underground, all this kind of stuff. Which I just thought, I don't know, but it was just more kind of party vibe, or I don't know, it was just something about the sound. I just enjoyed compared to everything else. But it's just each to their own, you know. Everybody's got their own vibe.
Yeah. So tell me, you were saying a little bit earlier that there was a little bit of sort of a Scottish hip hop scene that developed.
Aye, there still is even to this day.
Now tell me though, do they sing in dialect? The sort of heavier the better?
It's well, the stuff I was involved in always was. It was there was you couldn't put on a fake accent. You would be laughed off the stage for it. Because the whole thing to me when you're doing hip hop stuff, it's about keeping it real. I know people can argue there's an entertainment factor, but I don't think you've got much credibility if you're rapping like in a New York accent and you come from Glasgow, you know. So, does it make it harder for people? Probably. You know, I definitely think hip hop's easier to understand in an American accent, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But I don't think it makes it any better, because some of the best rappers, you know, some of the best rappers I've heard, they don't come from America. You know,
the reason why I asked is like you look at the French scene, right?
Yeah.
Where it's all in very working class French, or you know, or the dialects of some of the sort of immigrant groups who came in.
Yeah.
And that got very popular. And it turned out it was a perfect language to rap in. Right? It just worked out well. I don't think every language is. You know, so it was interesting. And so the Scottish sort of the heavy brogue, it works with it, do you find?
Aye, no,
does
definitely.
It complement it or not?
It does. The stuff that I enjoy, I don't listen to that much of it nowadays. The stuff that I do here, the guys that I know, there's guys that you can jump on Voldo records,
right?
The rap verses, you know, and they're Scottish guys, like, and like a guy from Edinburgh, Weird SOS, phenomenal rapper, really good. He's been on the scene for years, but it's just. He kills it. You know, every track I send him, he smashes it. He just does it so much justice. It's unbelievable. Further up in Fife, you got a guy, Jenkins. Even more, he wouldn't class himself as a Scottish rapper. You know, he's heavy, broad Scots, but he more identifies as a British rapper, a UK rapper. Which I get with that. You know, some people don't want pigeonholed as Scottish rapper because it's such a small scene, whereas you know the UK rap scene obviously is huge compared to the Scottish rap scene. But each to their own, you know, whatever they want to go under, and they're both very good MCs, and it's pretty cool because I've done that for years, and 2006 is probably when I stopped the kind of done the odd wee bit of hip hop since then, but you know. As far as the sort of Scottish scene was concerned,
right?
Apart from the odd track helping somebody out and things like that, and then as I've done the Voldo stuff and kind of get more back into music, you just can't shake off. You know, people for the hip hop scene still, oh, can you do me a beat? Can you do this? Can you do some cuts in a song? Or could you produce this? Could you? And it's my own fault because it's what I was known for back in the day, and I kind of still do it to this day. I've done an EP with Weird SOS, really cool. It's just the kind of slant. You know, I've sent him some instrumentals, and I've no idea what he's going to rap about, what he's going to come back with, and it's just like it's mind blowing, you know. And it's so cool because you get some people are great rappers, but this guy's always got a kind of message, a story to tell, you know. It's like really kind of heartfelt stuff. Totally admire. Outside of Scotland, there was shameless plug. So you've got this involves Scottish rappers as well, too. I was speaking about, but your main rapper is Erewhon,
Yeah.
who's Nigerian. Great guy, phenomenal rapper. We've got some other folk for, I think, so you've got for the US, you've got Sapphire, who sings on the EP. She's absolutely phenomenal. You've got Cello, another rapper. SJ6, no good doing some production. Christian Somber doing production. Jimmy Skiffle from Voldo playing guitar on it. Just like an absolute monster of collaboration for an EP. We spoke about doing a sort of 1 or 2 tracks, and it soon just gained legs. And that EP came out, and again, for somebody that's not really doing as much hip hop, it's a it's a hip hop album that's just dropped, So, and it's really cool, especially working with such a variety of talent from all over the world. It's brilliant, really, really good. They're all individually really talented people, and it's just good to pull them all together on a project.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's one of the biggest positives with the whole COVID and the shutdowns and all that. It really accelerated sort of collaborative projects with musicians from across the world. Because it really doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Especially when they're not going to let us play live, right?
I know.
Sort of thing. So no, it's interesting. So I have to ask you, just because I've got you on and you're from Scotland, one of my all-time favorite acts, and it's one that I think was very influential, although they didn't sell very much, was Orange Juice.
Orange Juice.
You don't remember? I'm wondering because it matters on what part of Scotland you were in, because they were Postcard Records,
right?
And what was his name? He had a really big hit as a solo artist afterwards a couple of years ago.
Right.
But they were the true originators of sort of shoegaze before it was even called that.
I don't think I've heard them, honestly.
No, really?
No.
No, it was very, very interesting. It was just like, what was his name? I'm just trying to think. He had an enormous hit, like a worldwide #1 about 5-6 years ago as a solo artist.
Aye.
I mean, he was the lead. He was the basically the band.
Right.
Like the lead singer wrote all the songs. I'll have to look that one up too. It's good having my. But you're not. No, so I was wondering how well known they were in Scotland.
See, the problem.
But this is early 80s. It's alt, but it was sort of after post-punk when things sort of mellowed out.
See,
and then it finally sort of ended in like the Darude column and all that kind of stuff, which I think they were also Scottish. And it's sort of pre-Mary Jesus and Mary Chain and that kind of thing. But that was pre that, but I think it all came out of the same scene. Because oftentimes someone gets successful with a little independent record company, and then they start signing whoever's interesting in the area, right? It's not necessarily bands that sound anything like another, especially if it's a really good scene, because there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 scenes all happening at once, right?
Yeah.
What was his name? Ian, hold on. I will do some more. Thank God for Wikipedia for music. It hasn't been totally. Orange Juice, the band. Yeah, Scottish, the jangle pop is what they called them.
Jangle pop.
Yes. Well, they do. They were very, very unapologetically pop music.
Right.
And do you know Jonathan Richter? If you ever heard of American, was popular. They played an endless number of he's in an endless number of soundtracks.
Right.
Sort of rom-coms and that got very popular after. And he wrote these sort of really quirky, sort of folky, but I'm just trying to think. So Yeah. No, it was they were the first artist that was on Postcard Records,
Right.
who also released like Joseph K, and then you probably know Aztec Camera.
Aye.
That sort of came out of the same, but they were the first ones, and I'm just trying to find Edwin Collins
That rings a
was
bell.
the guy who sang, and he did. Hold on, I'll go over to his. He also had a really big hit, which is A Girl Like You.
I probably know it.
A girl like you, and he had this like really sort of almost like a swaver Brian Ferry accent, sort of
Right.
singing style, like a little bit of a crooner.
All right.
Anyway, you should check it out. It was surprising for me because it was one of those things, where there's music that sort of clears your palate
Aye.
because you've been listening to something too long and it's gone as far as it can, and then it starts just becoming the same thing over and over again, and then it gets usually into loudness wars, or whatever. And for me, musically, it just sort of hit that whatever I was listening to, everything I was getting tired of.
Right.
And this was completely something different. And great pop songs, which I've always had like a real soft spot for myself. So what would you say then? What would you say was your biggest influence musically? Like if you had to do a desert island, like where would what record would you bring?
It's funny. I've actually done this. I've done this. London Peaky. They've got a website, and that was the question they asked me. I didn't have to think twice about it. James Brown, Live at the Apollo. It's the one. I mean, I've got it in vinyl, got it in CD, got it in cassette. You know what I mean? It's on my Spotify. It's every format possible. I never get tired of listening to this record. It's like I know word for word every song. It's so good. And even shouting out the bits that the audience are joining in with.
He was the greatest. No, he was absolutely the greatest. And so I'm guessing you fall on the Maceo Parker era bands, less than the Bootsy Collins bands.
Aye, pretty much. Aye.
So more soul than the funk.
Aye, because I mean,
they're both great. I mean, they were just how a man can put together two of the best bands of all time, right?
Aye, it's one of them where I know he's kind of later stuff from them. It's spot on. It's right on the money, but it's just that one particular album, and I don't know if it's just because of it's like listening to it at a certain time when I was growing up, and there was good memories, and I keep having good memories. If there's a certain occasion, my wife's probably sick of hearing it, but I'll be like, put that James Brown album on. It's just so good. I've sampled it in so many records, just little bits. He's just the go-to guy. If you're really struggling and you need some sort of sample, I'll guarantee you, if you dig through James Brown, you're going to find something, But that one particular album, it's just so good, and I never get tired of it.
Well, I think it's one of those magical cases where it's very much a reflection of what the music industry was like at the time.
Aye.
And the fact that he was probably performing 200 nights a year, if not more.
Aye.
And with the same band that were getting fined for making a mistake, and they weren't making many mistakes. Let's put it that way. And then he's the absolute consummate performer. There are very few who were able to own the audience the way he did and play with them and get them going. And the Apollo was like his home. That was like the Beatles in what was it called, the Cave or whatever in Liverpool. I mean, that was the same. That was his home field basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know with the record, was it one show or is it a compilation where they recorded from a number of shows and put them together?
No, that actual recording is from one show.
One show.
Yeah.
Wow.
That blows your mind.
That blows your mind.
You cannot find a single mistake. You know what I mean? I'll guarantee you, James Brown.
At $50 a mistake? No.
It's just mental. I say I've listened to it, so many times, and I can't. There's not one track, not one bit.
Yeah.
I think I'll just skip that bit. I love it, absolutely love it. Never get
Yeah.
tired of it. It's just my
Yeah,
go-to.
it's one of those magical records, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
That'll totally stand the test of time, and yeah.
definitely.
But I mean, there's weird stuff like that where especially early on before recording techniques became as good as they are,
Yeah,
where you hear some of these performances, whether live or in the studio, which
yeah,
was basically live without an audience, right?
aye, aye,
That they blow your mind because
yeah,
the band just sort of gets to a different level, and it's not that they're not only not making mistakes, but
aye, it's,
they're playing as this unit
aye,
that you know what I mean. You can't. Anyway.
aye. It's when you see, maybe it's like one microphone that's recording. It's basically it's one microphone recording the band.
Yeah.
The drummer, the guitarist, the bass player, with one mic, and they're just all stood in the correct place. And then you've got the vocalist with his own mic, but it's done at the same time. There
Yeah.
was no overdubs, no nothing like that. Like I say,
Yeah.
so it's essentially it's live. It's a live recording without an audience, and
Hmm.
you listen to it and you think it's mind blowing. And you think, wow, it's that turned out so well. Today's standards. Then I'll be honest. I don't think you can replicate that kind of sound without using the old tech.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
People are probably shouting at the screen just now, going, "Oh, yeah."
Well,
But
the old tech, and also someone who would know how to place the microphone,
yep, yep,
because that was a whole art in itself.
yep.
You
I've
know.
watched so many sort of documentaries, and it's showing you. My mind was blown when it was literally two mics. Like, no
Yeah.
way, that record's done with two mics. And yep, it is. And you
Yeah.
see the old compressors and stuff they use. These things are massive, and it's
Yeah.
brilliant, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Or the other thing is some of the stories of like those Phil Spector sessions back in the 60s when he was doing it in, I can't remember, the studio in Los Angeles with the Wrecking Crew, with
right?
all the best of the professional studio musicians.
Yeah.
And some of the stories with that, how he got his wall of sound? He
No, yes,
literally packed the studio with musicians.
right.
So there wasn't one guitar, there were 4 guitars playing the same part. There were
Man,
2 drummers. There were 3 bassists. There were 4 people on piano.
that's
Right?
crazy.
So you can only imagine, like, that sound he got was the actual sound in the room, right?
That's nuts.
And it was that thick because it had that many. It was like an orchestra. Like if you've ever seen like a proper symphonic orchestra
Yeah,
in a hall, like a good sounding music hall, the
yeah,
sound that group, like the orchestra, makes is unbelievable.
yeah. And that's
It's
something
very
I thought
loud.
that is something. If anybody watching this has never done, treat yourself and go and see an orchestra. Even if you don't dig classical music, like you're saying,
Yes.
that sound, you will not, but you'll be convinced that's going through amplifiers and big sound system and stuff. You're blown away.
Yeah.
I
And
think
even better, go and see an opera.
I was about to go into that. I was going to say my first experience.
Yeah.
It was an opera I seen first, and it was like, oh my god! And I
Yeah.
didn't have a. Luckily, believe it or not, there was subtitles coming up and stuff. I didn't have a clue as a kid when I went to this, and it
Doesn't
was
matter.
amazing. I
Yeah.
was blown away, absolutely
Yeah.
blown
Yeah. Yeah.
away. And it's the
Yeah.
same again. I'm going to see an orchestra, and it's just like,
Yeah.
wow,
But
wow,
go and see it in an old room,
yeah.
not
And
not in any of those modern concert halls. Go and see it
no,
in an old room,
it's
like
it's
one
a
of the best
total.
ones. One of the ones in London. I'm sure
Uh,
there must be one somewhere in Scotland, in
uh,
Edinburgh, I'd
there
imagine.
is there's
Yeah.
tons of them. It's just one of those kind of bucket list experiences.
Yes.
Everybody should experience it. They really
Yeah.
should. Such a cool thing.
Yeah.
Such a
And
cool
most
thing.
of those, there's standing room tickets that are cheap. In most of those
Aye,
old rooms, you can get
yeah,
very cheap stand. You have to stand for the show way up top, but that's where you
yeah.
want to be. The sound's best up there. you know
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant.
no, it's great. So listen, we're approaching an hour. And so I'm going to ask you one last question that I ask everyone.
Aye, go for
What was the first either record, tape, CD that you bought with your own money?
it.
So it was the
Ooh,
first thing that you bought as a kid, as a teenager.
I'm trying to think now. Was like good. My head's telling me it was a Transmission Vamp single, but I probably bought something before that. It's probably something pure cheesy. In fact, I'm pretty sure. It might even be something like, I don't know if you remember the band Aha.
Uh-huh.
I think they were Norwegian or something like that. Take on Me. I think
Yeah.
it could have been. It's about that time. There's
Well,
loads of
interesting fact, that song has been played on YouTube for over 1 billion times.
and they weren't all me.
And it wasn't all you.
I, I, it's still a great song. I know I'll get slated for that, but it's still a
Yeah.
classic tune. Absolute belter.
Yeah.
Song.
Aside from their challenged grammar, yes, I'd agree.
Aye, aye.
But aside from that, no, it's one of the it has to be one of the best of those 80s sort of synth pop songs that ever came out.
The video was so cool for it. The video was
Yes.
amazing.
I think the video helped too because it was on heavy rotation on all of the video channels.
Yeah.
Because it was very ahead of its time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, Nunny, pleasure. Stay online and we'll say our goodbyes. But thank you so much for your time and good luck with the new release. Do you have anything else coming out? Are you going to be releasing anything else in the near future?
Yes, I've not got dates, but I'm aiming for hopefully end of November for a new Voldo album.
Okay.
The album was recorded, mixed and mastered. There's 2 bonus songs going on it, and the producer for the remixes is remastering one of them. He'd sent me the 2 finished songs. They were done sounding great, and then he remastered one of them, and it was sounding phenomenal. And he says, I want to do the same to the other one, which I thought, fair enough. That'll be through it, I reckon, any day now. And the artist for that work, that's Cannon Hill Comics.
Yeah.
He's showed me a few sketches, which are absolutely crazy.
Nice.
All his mind works, but he always comes up with the goods. So just waiting on these kind of things. But the hard work for us as musicians has been done. It's written, recorded, and everything. So hopefully everything going well end of November for the release.
All right. So Voldo album, and is it an EP or an album?
It's an album.
An album. All right, great. End of November. Look for it for Christmas. It's a perfect time to be dropping a record.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much for your time. And everyone, please subscribe, like, do all the things so that I can keep doing this. And take care.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you.
No problem. And if I can get this, hold on. And I can end it.